Excuse me. Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are going to review They Shall Not Grow Old. This film was directed and produced by Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson is a New Zealand film director, screenwriter, and producer. This guy made Lord of the Rings, which means he's awesome by default. His newest film here is a documentary about the British soldiers who fought in World War I that follows them from the time they joined the military up until the time the war ended. And what makes this particular documentary so unique is that it uses footage shot during World War I that's been archived at the Imperial War Museum in the UK to tell this story. And instead of just using the raw footage the entire time, Peter Jackson and his team took it a step further and added color and removed both the scratches and blemishes from the film. Now, the film does use some raw footage for the first 20 minutes before the soldiers go to war, and then we also see the raw footage after they finish the war, which only takes up a small portion of the screen because of the quality of the film. Once the soldiers get to the battlefield, the picture expands and transforms with color, sound, and a consistent frame rate, bringing this war and really this documentary to life. It's important to note, during this time, film was a very new development, so the cameras they were using didn't record at 24 frames per second, which is the standard for both documentaries and films today, like this one. They had hand cranks to roll the camera back then, so a lot of the frame rates weren't consistent since a lot of people didn't hand crank at the same speed. Some footage was shot at 13 frames per second, some of it was 10, some of it was 18, so every piece of archival footage required its own detailed analysis and treatment. On top of all of this conversion work, what really blew my mind is the sound design. They added a lot of Foley and ambience to this war footage, and all of it sounds incredibly realistic. They even added in ADRs so we could hear what some of the soldiers are saying in the footage during certain parts, and it matches up perfectly. And what's even more crazy is that before they even recorded the ADR, they had to send the footage off to forensic lip readers so they could identify what the soldiers were saying since the footage was silent. It's insane when you think about the amount of time and expertise that was required to carry out this work. What I also liked about this film is that it still remembers to tell a compelling story. It doesn't just show off its technical prowess the entire time. This film is a very thorough and detailed look at trench warfare and what it was like to be a part of the First World War from the perspective of a British soldier, a lot of which weren't older than 18. This film's narration was edited together from over 600 hours of audio interview recordings from British soldiers who served in the war, and they go into really graphic detail about all sorts of things they had to go through. There's a lot of beautiful and profound commentary about survival and how the Germans and British still shared a certain level of humanity with each other, even though they were still enemies. It was so devastating to see how indifferent British civilians acted towards British soldiers who had just gotten home from the war. A lot of the soldiers go on to explain that civilians had taken their experiences for granted because they didn't go through it, and they didn't understand the brutality of war and the effects that it has on a person. A lot of people back then, and probably a lot of people now honestly, boil war down to just charging through the front lines and attacking the enemy and defeating them in a really heroic way, when in reality, these soldiers spent most of their time training, doing other mundane activities, and battling other things instead of the Germans, like lice, dysentery, starvation, and frostbite. Going to the bathroom was even a challenge for these soldiers because they didn't have a real bathroom to use and there was no privacy. They literally all just sat on this log and took a shit into this little mud pit. Sometimes there would be too many people sitting on this log, causing it to break, and they would fall into the pool of feces. If I had served in that war and fallen into that pool of feces, I would have fucking quit. When you see pictures or footage of a dead person or a person with a horrific injury in this film, it's all real and it's all incredibly repulsive. I was so disgusted by the picture of the soldiers whose feet had turned completely black and rotten from all the frostbite and infection they had endured. Some of these soldiers who didn't even fight in the battlefield had to get their legs and feet amputated because of other things. This film makes a great case on why war is such an awful and terrible thing that no one should ever have to go through. My only issue with this film is the pacing and the monotony of the voiceovers. In this film, you hear a lot of accounts from a lot of different soldiers and their experiences, and there's a lot of impactful and emotional sound bites, but a lot of what they're saying blends together in a very matter-of-fact and calm way, which makes the film feel kind of dull and procedural sometimes. This war was ultimately a job to them, so when they're not talking about certain things as passionately as I think they should be, you know, it makes sense. But when you're an audience member looking at this whole thing from the outside, from your perspective, it's really extraordinary. So to hear someone talk about it in such a dull way just seems really boring. I think this film should have taken a better effort to infuse more emotion into those sound bites that kind of come off as stale. There's not a lot of music, and I think it would have helped to add music during the parts where these voiceovers start feeling emotionally devoid. But this is still an excellent documentary. I highly recommend it. If you're a history buff, definitely go out and see it. I'm going to give They Shall Not Grow Old a 4 out of 5. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave your thoughts on this film in the comment section below. Please leave a recommendation on a film that I should watch and review next while you're down there. Be sure to check out the other content on my channel. I got plenty of other reviews you might be interested in watching, including my most recent recap of all the films I saw in January. Hit the like button if you like this video, or share this video, or both, whichever you prefer. I don't care. And as always, if you dig the channel, then subscribe to the channel. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Josh. I'm gonna go drink now. Have a great night. I'll see you later.